Alright, this is Senya, and this is probably the best story that I have for my graphic memoir. It all started when I was in 5th grade, and my family hosted 2 foreign exchange students, one from South Korea and one from Vietnam. Their names were Sojung and Nu. At the end of the school year, the girl from Vietnam graduated and she went off to college, so she didn't live with us anymore. Sojung, who was a junior at the time, stayed with us for another year. So did her sister Anna. After they stayed with us for another year, their parents invited us to come visit them in South Korea. I was 12 at the time. So we took a plane to San Francisco, then another to Seoul. Sojung and her mother met us at the airport in Korea. On the taxi ride to their apartment building, I got sick. So Sojung's mother quickly handed me a bread bag that still had bread in it to throw up in. And naturally, I was really embarrassed. We got to the apartment, and I met the rest of Sojung and Anna's family. Their father, their aunt, their uncle, and their 10-year-old cousin Hui. They were all very nice. Hui was very quiet, but Sojung told me that he was being shy and that he could actually speak English really well. Even though we didn't talk a whole lot, we became friends quickly, as kids often do. He shared his candy with me and gave me a checkerboard headband with a little green bicyclist embroidered on it. I wore it almost every day that we were in Korea. There were a few days where I got to go out with the others and explore South Korea, but most of the time I stayed in the apartment, sick as a dog. It was terrible. I had extreme nausea, headaches, and I could hardly keep a meal down, which sucked because I was in another country and the food was amazing. One day, my parents, Sojung, and I went to the clinic to see what was wrong with me. The doctor diagnosed me with extreme dehydration, a horribly off diagnosis, as I would later learn. I had my first IV line that day, which scared me a lot. Sojung asked the doctor for medication to ease the pain. Though he thought it was an odd question, he accepted. I asked what was in the IV, being pumped into my body. The doctor grinned and said in English, "Magic water." I wasn't comforted by that. The doctor recommended that I spend the day roaming around Seoul with my family, or walking it off, but I couldn't do it. I was too sick and too weak. A few nights into the trip, I woke up with excruciating pain in my back and my head. I cried until my dad came into the room. I slept on the floor that night to try to reduce the pain in my back. My family was worried that I would be too sick to be on an airplane for 10 hours, so we decided to stay in Korea for an extra week. One day, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and noticed that one of my eyes wasn't tracking normally. I told my parents, but no one other than me could see it. A few days later, I started seeing double, 2 of everything. It made trying to sightsee really frustrating. By the time we left South Korea, I was actually feeling a lot better. My body was hurting less and I felt less nauseous. It was a Monday. Then, when we were going through security in San Francisco, my mom noticed my lazy eye. She called the hospital at home and tried to schedule an appointment for the next day, but when she mentioned the lazy eye and the double vision, the doctor said to come straight to the emergency room once we got to Minneapolis. The plane ride home was surprisingly calming. The June sun was shining and the pain had subsided. A little girl and her father were sitting in front of me. The little girl was talking about how excited she was to see her grandma. It was really cute. My grandma picked us up at the airport. We asked her to take us to the hospital instead of home. We explained what was going on the way there. I sat with my parents and my grandma in the waiting room, eating the egg salad sandwiches my grandma had brought for us. Pretty soon, a nurse came out and she asked me to rank the pain that I had been feeling in my head from 1 to 10. I told her 6. We followed the nurse out of the waiting room and I had a CAT scan, a detailed computer-generated scan of my brain. As it turned out, the doctor back in Korea had been horribly mistaken when he diagnosed me with extreme dehydration. I had acute subdural hematoma. In other words, my brain was bleeding and the entire left side of my skull was full of blood. That blood was pushing my brain off-center and making my eye go lazy. It was no wonder why I'd been having those headaches. I was to have surgery the next day. For having just been told that I needed brain surgery, I was pretty calm. I just laid there, and I remembered a song that my friend had told me about before I left for Korea. It was comforting. Before I went into surgery, the nurse put a tube up my nose. It drove me nuts. I was so focused on the tube in my nose and the fish painted on the walls that I didn't even remember falling asleep. A second later, I opened my eyes and I was in a different room. It had happy yellow walls and there were curtains on either side of me. I silently wondered how I was transported from one room to another so quickly. As 2 blurry nurses came into my field of vision, I realized where I was. I was in a recovery room. I had just had brain surgery. One of the nurses asked me if I wanted a popsicle, and I realized that my throat was on fire. It turned out that they had stuck a tube down my throat so that I could breathe during surgery. Also, while it felt like I had only been unconscious for a minute, it had really been hours. The neurosurgeon shaved off part of my hair and drained the blood from my skull. It took me a while to realize that my hair was gone. I took it pretty rough. I stayed in the ICU that night, the intensive care unit. I shared a room with a toddler and a baby. I didn't know the toddler's name, but I heard that the baby's was Tristan. Sometimes they both cried at the same time and hurt my head, but I couldn't blame them though. They had to be very sick to be in the ICU. It was a very nice nurse in the ICU. Her name was Rebecca and she talked to me and let me pick out movies to watch. I slept too much to ever finish a movie, but I still appreciated the gesture. I asked Rebecca if I would see her again, and she said that I would if I was still in that part of the hospital when she came back for her next shift. I was transferred to a regular room the next afternoon. I never saw the face of the toddler who shared an IC room with me, but as I was being wheeled out of there, I turned and I saw the baby, Tristan. hooked up to machines with a bunch of wires, and I groggily gave him my blessing. My grandma and my parents never left my side. Now and then, one or two of them would run home to feed the dogs or change clothes, and the others would stay with me. Even after I was moved to a regular room, I was heavily medicated and weak, but I always got up to use the bathroom. I hated using the bedpan. As soon as I got to the regular room, I was allowed to have visitors. Lots of people came to see me. Friends, my parents' co-workers, and so on. I received many gifts, many people cried, and I didn't really understand why. I was fine. I had the surgery I needed, and I was alive. I came to realize that that was exactly why some of them were crying. They were so relieved that I didn't die. The friend who had told me about that song right before the trip cried the hardest. I apologized for worrying her, but I think that we were both just really happy to see each other. I got out of the hospital by Friday, with the weekend, the rest of the summer, and my whole life ahead of me. With half of my hair gone and 2 big scars on the side of my head, naturally, I had a pretty good story to tell on my first day of middle school.